Hi, I'm Lucy Van Olden-Barneveld. Welcome to Creative Block. On today's show, award-winning author Elizabeth Hay and singer-songwriter Kim Wempe. Elizabeth Hay is a Giller Prize-winning author. Her latest book, Alone in the Classroom, is a gripping drama with an unsettling story that parallels a personal experience from her past. She recently stopped by our studios to talk about this riveting book. Elizabeth Hay, welcome to Creative Block.
Thank you.
Now let's start by talking about the book and how you describe it in your own head, what it's about.
Well, I think it's about how we're drawn to the past and how the past comes forward and collides with the present. So some of the elements in the book are inspired by my mother's memories of growing up in the Ottawa Valley. Her memory of a high school principal she had, who was a disturbed and disturbing man. Her memory of a schoolmate who was raped and murdered in 1937 in the Ottawa Valley. So the narrator, Anne, pieces together these stories from the past and discovers her own role in the unfolding drama. And I think that, you know, when you go deeper into the past and open it up, it sheds interesting light on the present.
Why did you find such darkness in a classroom?
Well, we all know that visceral feeling of being alone in a classroom with our own stupidity, our own panic, you know, our own loneliness. And I wanted to get at that, to tap into that visceral emotion that gets stirred up in school and that we never lose, so that you know, even now, for instance, Sunday evening has a certain tension to it because of Monday, school, exams again, tests again, and so on. And I also think we learn this wonderful narrative rhythm at school of tension, you know, tests, classroom, followed by release, whether it's recess or the glory of summer. And so we know in our bones the narrative rhythm that drives fiction, actually.
And seizing on the theme of education, you talk about your dad, who was a principal.
Right.
Tell me about him and about the role in your life that he played, because you were at the same school with him.
Well, I was. For my sins, yes. I was in my father's high school. And that just for 2 years. But, you know, I would go to school and then I'd come home to school. School never went away. I got a double dose of it. And I make use of this little bit of information in the book, actually. I give this fact to my narrator, that at exam time, my father would take me and my brothers and drive us to the high school and put each of us in a separate classroom to study. And we would spend, you know, Saturday morning alone in the classroom studying for exams. I grew up under the shadow of my father, who was a very good man, but a very intimidating man, and under the shadow of school. So it's no wonder that I've written a book called Alone in the Classroom.
Yeah. And you lost your father in September.
Well, yes, I did. So my father died on September 14th. He was almost 92. And the wonderful thing, actually, about the last couple of years is that in having him here in Ottawa with my mother, we moved them from London, Ontario, I got to know him in a different way. So, you know, the past does open up, you know, it really does. And you're able to form a wider relationship with people.
Tell me more about this character, Parley Burns, in your book, based sort of in part on what you heard from your mother. How did the real and the fiction come together for you to create this man?
Yeah, she gave me a gift, actually. She gave me the real kernel of somebody. And then my job, my challenge, was to open that up into a fictional character in a fictional world. And when she told me about him, it was about 20 years ago, she was reminiscing about this high school principal, nicknamed Parley because he taught French. And I was riveted Everything she said was fascinating to me. And in the next room, in the living room, was my own father, a retired high school principal. So I had emotion and situation working on two different levels, and I knew I had the ingredients for something. But this was, 20 years ago, and I wasn't very adept at writing fiction at all. So it took me a long time to learn how to take those real things and move them out, open them up into this fictional world. I didn't want Parley Burns to be a one-dimensional villain. I wanted him to be a three-dimensional villain. So there has to be room for the reader to think about a character and to move through the character's personality. That's what fiction can do for you. You get to live with the character.
Tell me about that time when you were 15 then, that the world opened up to you and you thought, hey, this is something that I could be, or this is something I want to do.
Well, we were living in England that year, and the English teacher, this young woman with sort of strawberry blonde hair, came into the classroom and she said to us, without any warning, open up your books and read this poem. It was a poem by D.H. Lawrence. So we did. And then she said, now, close your books and take out your notebooks. And we all did this. And she said, now, write down whatever comes into your mind. So because there was no warning, I didn't have time to get nervous or doubt myself. And I just went to town on the basis of the thoughts that flooded my mind, having read the poem. And it was a revelation, actually, to realize that if you weren't nervous and self-conscious, and if you kind of made use of what you were reading, lots of thoughts tumbled out. I'd had no notion of being a writer before then, but as soon as this world opened up to me, it was my world. It was, and as I say, it happened in the classroom. And I used to work in radio, and I always felt that the writing I did for radio and the writing my real writing were very separate. And it took me a long time to realize that, in fact, the writing I was doing for radio might have been more real than my so-called real writing. Because in radio, you always have to remember that you're telling a story.
And how do you take that lesson and apply it all these years later?
Well, I do try to reapply it. And sometimes I forget what the nature of the lesson. But I reapply it in this sense that I reading and writing go hand in glove for me, so that when I'm feeling stuck, I will take a book and read a few pages, and I lose that sense of my mind having seized up, and things start to flow, so that I rely on what I read to fuel my imagination. And it's very much a symbiotic relationship.
When you sat down to write this book, obviously you had a heady time 4 years ago winning the Giller Prize. What is that like for a writer? Talk about intimidation, perhaps not, sitting down to write the next book. What was that like for you?
Well, I loved winning the Giller.
Sure.
It was wonderful. It was my moment of glory. In terms of writing the next book, I've always said it didn't make a huge difference, because when you're at your desk, you're dealing with all of your limitations, as you always have done. So it's a humbling business, writing. It's hard to have a swelled head when you're writing.
So when you are out touring a book, it is printed, it is ready to go, and then you begin the cross country, around the world sometimes, touring of it, talking about it over and over and over again. What's that like for a writer, a solitary profession? You spend a lot of time alone. Now here you are, months on end, talking to people all the time. What's that like?
Yeah, well, it reminds me actually of my book, because Alone in the Classroom, what you have in the classroom is sort of the shock of overexposure. On the part, the teacher is overexposed to the class, and the class, as they make their mistakes and reveal themselves to each other, experience moments of overexposure too. So it's the shock of overexposure. That's what it's like, and you bring yourself and your book out into the public eye, and what I try to do is think of things to say about it, because to tell you the truth, you write a book, and And then you have to find ways to talk about it that make it sound as if you knew what you were doing. So it's a little bit like homework. I'll sit down and I think, all right, what is this book about? And they'll ask me this and this, and I'll try and say, well, I can say this and I can say that. And I'll say to my husband, Mark, what can I say about this book? I can't think of anything to say about this book. So it's like that. It's very stressful, in fact.
Well, you've convinced us. It was a lovely book, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for telling us about it.
Thank you. Thank you.